"You're still awake?" That's what she said when she walked through the door at 11:47 on a Tuesday night. Not hello, not I missed you. Just, "You're still awake." Like, she was surprised I existed in my own living room. I had the TV on, but I wasn't watching it. I'd been sitting there for about 2 hours with a glass of bourbon that had gone warm, just thinking. The kind of thinking you do when something feels off but you can't name it yet. That low hum in your chest that your brain keeps trying to explain away. "Couldn't sleep," I said. She set her purse down on the kitchen counter, the same way she always did, and I watched her. 23 years of marriage, and I still watched her. Her name was Vivian. She was 51, still beautiful in the way that certain women become more beautiful as they age. Like time was agreeing with her. She'd taught high school English for 19 years. She read actual novels, not just summaries. She was the person I called when I didn't know what I was feeling. Or she used to be. "You should get some rest, Neil," she said. "You've got that early meeting tomorrow." I nodded. I went to bed. I didn't sleep. Let me back up, because this didn't start on that Tuesday night. That was just the night something finally cracked open inside me and let the truth in. My name is Neil Hargrove. I'm 61 years old. I spent 32 years working as a civil engineer for a county infrastructure firm in western Pennsylvania. The kind of work that doesn't sound glamorous but keeps bridges standing and roads from swallowing people's cars. I retired early, 58, with a decent pension and enough saved to not have to worry. We had a house in a quiet neighborhood outside Pittsburgh. 4 bedrooms, a backyard that needed more attention than I gave it. 2 kids. Our son Marcus was grown and living in Denver, and our daughter Celia had just gotten married the previous spring. Vivian and I had the kind of marriage I thought was solid, not perfect. We'd had our rough patches, arguments about money in the early years, distance during the stretch when the kids were teenagers, and we were both exhausted in different ways. But we'd always come back to each other. We traveled together. We cooked Sunday dinners. We had a standing date every Friday night where we'd try a different restaurant. I trusted her completely. That's the part I keep coming back to. Not the betrayal itself, though that was its own specific kind of devastation, but the trust. How absolute it was, how I never even thought to question it. It started the previous fall, about 8 months before everything came apart. Vivian mentioned at dinner one night that her friend Rochelle was planning a trip. A reunion of sorts. Vivian's college girlfriends, 5 of them, had been talking about doing something big for years. 50 was supposed to be the milestone, but it got pushed. Then COVID happened, then life happened. Now Rochelle was finally pulling it together. 10 days in Scottsdale, Arizona. A resort. Spa treatments, pool days, dinners out. The kind of trip that made sense for women who'd spent decades taking care of everyone else. Rochelle's covering the villa rental, Vivian said. She just got that settlement from the property dispute with her ex. Rochelle had money. Old family money, plus the settlement, plus a second career in real estate. I'd met her a handful of times over the years and liked her well enough. Loud laugh, generous. The type who picked up the check before you even saw it coming. "Sounds like fun," I said. And I meant it. Vivian's face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in a while. "You really don't mind?" "Of course not. You've been talking about this trip for years. Go." She kissed me on the cheek like I'd given her something precious. I remember thinking how nice that felt, how easy it was to make her happy. That was October. The trip was scheduled for the following March. Between October and March, I noticed things. I want to be honest about that. I didn't miss them. I just didn't know what to do with them. She started going to the gym more. Which, fine. I went to the gym. She said she wanted to feel good in a swimsuit, and that's a thing people say. She started getting her hair done differently, spent more time on her phone in the evenings, laughing quietly at things she didn't share with me. When I asked who she was texting, she'd say, "Just Rochelle, coordinating the trip," and turn the screen over casually enough that it didn't seem like she was hiding it. I told myself I was imagining things. I was not imagining things. But I want you to understand where I was mentally. 60 years old, retired, settled. When you've been with someone for over 2 decades, you develop a kind of faith in them that operates below the level of conscious thought. You don't look for reasons not to trust them. You'd have to deliberately choose to be suspicious, and that felt like a betrayal of its own. so I let it go. Every single flag. She left for Scottsdale on a Thursday morning in March. I drove her to Pittsburgh International, carried her bag to the curb, kissed her goodbye. "I'll call you every night," she said. "You don't have to. Have fun. Be present." She looked at me for a second. Something crossed her face that I couldn't read. And then she said, "I love you, Neil. I love you too." I watched her walk through the sliding doors and disappear. She called me that first night, and the second. Third night she called late, sounded tired, laughed too easily at things I said. After that the calls got shorter. The fourth night I got a text. "Rochelle planned a dinner thing, calling tomorrow, miss you." Fifth and sixth nights, similar. By the end of the trip we were down to a couple of texts a day, mostly logistical. She was busy. She was with her friends. I told myself that was fine. People unplug on vacation. She came home on a Sunday. I had dinner ready when she got there. Nothing elaborate, just roasted chicken and vegetables, because that was her favorite after traveling. She seemed happy when she walked in. Tanned. A little tired. She hugged me for a long time and I held her and I thought, there she is, like she'd come back to me somehow. She went to bed early. And I sat in the living room with that glass of warm bourbon and that low hum in my chest, and I still didn't know what I was trying to hear. The first concrete thing happened about 6 weeks later. Vivian had been quieter than usual since she came back. Not cold, not distant exactly, but quieter. Thoughtful in a way that looked more like worry. I chalked it up to post-vacation blues. Coming back to routine after 10 days in the Arizona sun wasn't exactly thrilling. Then one morning in late April, I came downstairs and she was in the kitchen and she looked like she hadn't slept. She was standing at the counter with a mug of coffee and she didn't hear me come in. She was just staring at nothing. "Viv?" She startled, turned around, and her eyes were red. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. I'm fine. Just tired." She wasn't fine. But she said she was fine, and I didn't push, and that was a mistake. 2 weeks after that, she came to me. I was in the backyard on a Saturday afternoon, doing the thing I always meant to do and rarely got around to, which was cleaning up the garden beds along the back fence. She came out and stood on the patio and watched me for a minute without saying anything. "Neil," she said finally. Something in the way she said my name. Just the one word and I felt the floor drop. I stood up. I looked at her. She was holding her hands together in front of her and she wasn't meeting my eyes. "I need to tell you something." I waited. "I'm pregnant." I don't know exactly how long I stood there. It felt like a long time. The birds were still making noise. A dog was barking a couple yards over. The world kept going while I stood in my own backyard with dirt on my gloves and tried to understand what she'd just said. I stopped. Started again. "How, Neil? I'm so sorry." "How, Vivian?" She started to cry. Not loudly, not dramatically, just tears, quiet and steady, like she'd been storing them up for weeks. Which she had been, she told me. She said it happened during the trip. She said she wasn't going to tell me that she'd planned to. She couldn't finish the sentence. She said it had only been once. She said she was sorry. She was so sorry. She didn't know how this happened. "Who?" I said. She shook her head. "Who, Vivian?" She looked at me then, and I saw something in her face that wasn't just guilt. It was fear. The specific fear of someone who knows the next sentence is going to make everything so much worse. "Derek," she whispered. It took me a moment. Then it landed. Derek Ashworth, Rochelle's husband. I need to stop here for a second. Because if you've never had one of those moments where a single piece of information restructures your understanding of everything you thought you knew, I don't know how to explain it to you. It wasn't just that Vivian had been with someone else. It was who. Derek Ashworth was someone I'd shaken hands with at Rochelle's 4th of July parties. Someone I'd had beers with at a backyard cookout 3 summers ago. Someone whose wife was one of Vivian's oldest friends. The 4 of us had been to dinner together. I had, at some point in the last decade, probably laughed at one of his jokes. And he had been in Scottsdale. I didn't ask her about that right away. I couldn't. I said something. I don't even remember what. And I walked inside and I went upstairs and I sat on the edge of our bed and I put my face in my hands and I just sat there. I didn't cry. I wanted to. I think it would have felt better if I had. Instead, I just felt this terrible stillness, like all the noise in my life had suddenly stopped, and I was sitting in the silence of everything I was about to lose. Over the next few days, I found out the rest of it. I didn't ask all at once. I couldn't have held all of it at once. It came in pieces. Derek had told Rochelle he was coming down to Scottsdale for a business meeting. He'd stayed one night, not at the resort but at a hotel nearby. And Vivian had met him there, so it wasn't a spontaneous thing. It was planned. I sat with that for a long time, because there's a difference, isn't there? There's a difference between a terrible mistake made in a moment of weakness and something that required planning, that required lying to your husband about who was going to be there, that required a level of intention that I hadn't let myself consider. When I confronted Vivian with this, calmly, because I had no other gear left, she didn't deny it, she just cried. She said it had been going on in some capacity for months. Not physically, she said, not before that night, but they'd been talking. For months. While I was sitting in my living room, thinking she was texting Rochelle about villa arrangements, I asked her if she loved him. She was quiet for a long time. I thought I might, she said. Here's the thing about being 61 and hearing your wife say something like that. When you're younger, I think the overwhelming feeling is rage. I've talked to enough men who've been through this to know that the first response is usually something violent and hot. You want to break things, confront someone, make the pain into something external so you can fight it. I felt rage. I won't pretend I didn't. But it was underneath something else. Something heavier and quieter. It was grief. The specific grief of realizing that the life you thought you were living isn't the life that was actually happening. I grieved the last 8 months. Every dinner I'd made her. Every Friday night date. Every night I heard her laugh at her phone and thought, she's happy, that's good. I had been moving through a version of my marriage that didn't exist. I also felt, and this is harder to admit, a kind of embarrassment. The quiet, private kind. The kind where you're not embarrassed in front of anyone else, but in front of yourself. I missed it. All of it. I thought I knew my wife. I thought I knew my life. And none of it had been what I thought. That was the hardest part of those first few weeks. Not the anger. The humiliation of having trusted someone so completely. I called our son Celia's brother. I called Marka evening about a week after Vivian told me. He's 33, lives out in Denver, works in software. He's got his mother's eyes and my stubbornness. I told him as much as I could manage without my voice breaking more than twice. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Dad, what do you need?" That's my son. He didn't ask for the details. He didn't offer opinions. He just wanted to know what I needed. I don't know yet, I said. Okay, call me when you do. I'll be on a plane. I called my daughter Celia next. She was harder. She loved her mother fiercely, always had, and I could hear her trying to process it in real time. She cried. She got angry. She said things about her mother that I didn't argue with but also didn't encourage. By the end of the call, she just said, "Dad, I love you," and that was enough. I didn't call Rochelle. I didn't know what to say to her, and frankly, it wasn't my place. I figured Derek had his own reckoning coming, and I was right. Vivian told me later that Rochelle had found out, from Derek himself apparently, sometime in that same week. I have no idea what happened in that marriage. I didn't have the bandwidth to think about it. I spent a lot of those early weeks just trying to figure out what I actually wanted. Some men would have tried to save the marriage. I understand that impulse. 23 years is a long time, and leaving means acknowledging that it's over, that all that time is behind you, that you're starting something new at 61. That's terrifying. I won't pretend it wasn't, but I kept coming back to one thing. When I asked Vivian if she loved him, she hadn't said no. She'd sat in silence for long enough that the silence was its own answer, and then she'd said she thought she might. And you can't unknow that. You can forgive a lot of things. You can work through betrayal if both people are committed to it. But you cannot rebuild a marriage when your wife is sitting across from you and she's not sure whether she loves you more than someone else. I already knew what I was going to do. I just needed a few weeks to stop, hoping I was wrong. I consulted an attorney. Her name was Patricia Doyle, family law, 25 years of practice, no nonsense in the best possible way. She sat across from me in her office and asked me questions I'd never had to answer out loud before and somehow made it feel manageable. In Pennsylvania, you can file for divorce on no-fault grounds, but you can also cite adultery. And given the circumstances, I had that option available. I didn't file for years of animosity. I filed for what was fair. We'd been married 23 years. Most of our significant assets had been built together: the house, retirement accounts, savings. Pennsylvania is an equitable distribution state, which doesn't mean equal but means the court considers what's fair given the circumstances. Patricia walked me through it all. The marriage had been, on paper, collaborative. Vivian had worked through most of it. The contributions were reasonably balanced until my retirement. But Patricia also told me something I hadn't considered. I'd inherited money during our marriage, about $140,000 from my uncle's estate 8 years prior. I'd put it in a separate account and never mingled it with our joint finances, mostly out of a vague sense that it was separate. It was, legally, still mine. It had grown. Patricia made sure I understood what I was entitled to protect. I wasn't going to take Vivian to the cleaners. That wasn't who I was. But I also wasn't going to hand over things I'd spent a lifetime building, because she'd made her choices, and I was supposed to absorb the consequences. The house went on the table. We negotiated. I kept the retirement accounts I'd built before and during our marriage, in proportion to my contributions. The house, we agreed to sell and split the proceeds, with adjustments for the inheritance funds I'd reclaimed. She got what was fair, not what was generous. There's a difference. I told Vivian my decision on a Thursday evening in late May. I'd asked her to sit down. I'd made coffee because my hands needed something to do. I've retained an attorney, I said. I'm filing for divorce. She nodded, like she'd known this was coming, like she'd been waiting for it. Neil, I'm not angry, I said. I want you to know that. I'm not doing this to punish you. I know I'm doing it because I can't stay. Not after. I stopped. Let out a long breath. Not after everything. She was crying again. Quietly. She had done a lot of quiet crying in those weeks. I'm sorry, she said. I know that doesn't fix anything. No, I said. It doesn't. We sat there for a while. Two people who had spent 23 years building something together, sitting in the kitchen of the house that was about to go on the market, drinking coffee that was getting cold. There was nothing dramatic about it. No screaming, no thrown dishes, just the particular silence of something ending. After a while, she got up and said she'd sleep in the guest room. She'd been doing that for weeks already. But that night it felt different, more final. I sat at the kitchen table alone for a long time. The coffee went cold. The house was very quiet. The divorce was finalized 8 months later, in January. Marcus flew in from Denver the day the paperwork was done. He didn't make a big deal of it. Just showed up at my door with a 6-pack of decent beer and a pizza, and we watched football and talked about everything except what had happened, which was exactly right. Exactly what I needed. Celia called from Seattle, where she and her husband had moved after the wedding. She said, "Dad, you did the right thing." I didn't know if that was true or not, but I appreciated her saying it. I had lunch with Patricia Doyle one more time after the finalization. Not professionally, just. I think I needed to sit across from someone who had seen the worst of this and still thought I'd come out of it with my dignity. She ordered a salad. I ordered a burger. She told me most of her clients at my stage of life were surprised by how free they felt within the first year. I wasn't sure I believed her. But I wrote it down somewhere in my head and decided to wait and see. It's been 14 months now. I'll tell you what nobody tells you about this kind of ending. When you're in the middle of it, they tell you about the grief, the anger, the legal process. They tell you it gets better. What they don't really capture is the specific texture of life on the other side. The house sold faster than I expected. I bought a smaller place, a 2-bedroom condo near the river, 15th floor, with a view of the bridges that I spent the first month just looking at. There's something about bridges that I've never been able to shake. 32 years of engineering habit. I know how they're built. I know what holds them up. I find them reassuring. I started cooking more. Real cooking. Not the basic rotation of the same 12 meals that had sustained our household for 2 decades, but actual cooking. I took a class at a culinary school downtown. I was the oldest person there by about 20 years. Nobody cared. On weekends, I cook things that take 3 hours and serve no one but myself, and I find it deeply, quietly satisfying. Marcus visited in the spring. We went to a Pirates game, sat in decent seats, ate bad ballpark food, and talked more honestly than we had since he was in high school. He told me things about his own life he'd never told me before. I told him things about mine. It was one of the best days I'd had in years. Celia and her husband came in the summer. She looked at my condo, toured every room, stood at the window looking at the river, and said, "Dad, this is actually really nice." She sounded surprised. I laughed. It was the first real laugh I'd had in a long time, and it felt like something unlocking. I've thought a lot about what I'd tell someone who was where I was 18 months ago, standing in their backyard with dirt on their gloves, trying to comprehend something they weren't built to comprehend. I don't have a clean answer. I don't think there is one. What I know is this: the life I thought I had was not the life I was actually living, and that's a terrible thing to find out. But it's also, in a way that took me a long time to see, a kind of freedom. Because the life I have now, smaller in some ways, quieter, less certain, is actually mine. I'm not moving through a version of something that doesn't exist. Every dinner I cook, every morning I wake up and look at those bridges, every conversation with my kids, it's all real. It's all actually happening. That's worth more than I would have known how to say, back when I was sitting in my living room with warm bourbon and that low hum in my chest, waiting to hear something I wasn't ready for. I'm ready, now. Not for everything. Not all at once. But for what comes next. That's enough.